Konstantin Mahaletsky, who was born in Luhansk. He graduated from a university in Chicago. He's a father of 2 kids, and he works in an international investment fund now. So the floor is yours. Good afternoon. I'm Konstantin Mahaletsky. I'm a partner in a leading foreign investment fund that over 20 years been working in Ukraine. Here I'm as a volunteer, not a businessman, to tell you my conclusions and biggest impressions from the Maidan in brief. These are my impressions about key events and my friends and about the people of Ukraine in general, although this may sound very highfalutin. I knew all those people before Maidan. I had very positive thought and idea about them, but now it has radically changed when I, for instance, saw how Lana has opened an underground hospital that we helped to defend, to protect, to guard. You know, I couldn't even imagine that people could go to such risks and achieve such results. About expectations, about what's happening now, I would rephrase with the words of John Kennedy, who could tell if he were in our shoes, he would say, don't ask what the new government has done for you. Think about what you've done for Ukraine. In general, the trends that I observe are positive, and many people from the business are going to politics, to the government, to state-owned companies. I, for instance, take part in a Aspen initiative that is rather well known, and one of the groups that I studied with, there were less than 20 people in our group, but they were Dmitro Shimkiv, Vladislava Rutitska, Hanna Hopko, who have now joined the government. Dmitro is in the administration of the president. Vladislava is, for instance, the deputy minister on Euro integration in the agrarian ministry, and Hanna Hopko is one of the Samopomich party leaders. This is a very positive trend to involve such people into politics and government. The next project that I am part of is the active government, professional government, involving people who graduated from Western universities so that they bring professionalism and Western ideas to our government structures. For instance, Yuri Vitrenko became an advisor to the head of Naftogaz. Then Pasko became an advisor at the administration of the president and the cabinet of ministers. Those are positive trends that we should welcome. Of course, our expectations could be bigger, and they are not realized to the full, but we do hope that the new cabinet of ministers and the new leaders of the parliament formed of progressive managers and public activists, they will be represented there on a bigger scale. And if when talking about business, because I think that I can create most value in business, this is the integration into Europe, the increase of sales to Europe and the more active work there, which allows to bring investment and also make the business more transparent and raise the competitiveness of our manufacturing and make Ukraine more known. In your short interview that we took from all the participants of this project, you say that you regret that a great Ukraine's potential is squandered. Can you comment on this? When I was studying at a Chicago university that produced the biggest number of Nobel prize winners in the world. There were 3 Ukrainians together with me. And we were studying not worse than our colleagues from other countries. I may be subjective, but I think that on average we were even better. And when I see how we live, how our country lives, how my classmates from Luhansk, or people with whom I studied in Kiev at the Economic University live, there's a huge difference. The potential that is there is not used. I hope that the initiatives that I was talking about and that other guys will talk about will help to change this situation. Now the floor is given to Alexander Romanenko, who is a son and grandson of generals, and now he is an owner of a furniture-making facility. How did you find yourself on Maidan? Yes, I am Alexander Romanenko. I am a co-owner of 2 companies. One of them equips offices, and the other delivers stationery and souvenirs and all this. I came to Maidan after the student demonstration was dispersed. As the majority of the population of Ukraine, I was very indignant about this fact, although honestly I was not an ardent adherent of signing the agreement with the European Union. I thought that it was badly prepared. For instance, Poland has been preparing for the signing of this association for several years, and they managed to survive the crisis easily because of the special conditions that they won from the European Union. And also Latvia, for instance, who have signed the agreement rather quick, without deep elaboration. They were not very well after joining the EU. As far as my expectations are concerned, during the Maidan, as in 2004, I admired our people. Honestly, before 2004, I didn't have a feeling that Ukrainians are just one nation, one people who are prepared to fight for their dignity, like in Bogdan Khmelnytsky's time. But the revolution of dignity has confirmed this once more and even exceeded my expectations and admiration. However, the expectations after the revolution, I have a great disappointment. I am a historian by education, and I'm looking at the process that is taking part in our country. Revolution can bring along some positive moments on the world scale, but in the country where it takes place, where people take part in it, this is rather bad, especially if it goes on for some time. So I think that many people who have come to power now really do not have the right to hold positions that they hold, do not have the right to tell things that they are telling, and it's rather people are indifferent about it. It is all the same for people who steals from the state and from their pockets. Yanukovych's stooges or the orange, so-called oranges people. And there's quite a lot of examples in the world. For instance, the Revolution of Roses in Georgia, where people came to power and started to reform, to conduct reforms. We have to raise salaries for officials, for our law enforcers. We should build residences for the refugees from Donbass. Also, the revolution in Kyrgyzstan is another example where they toppled Mr. Akayev, and in 5 years another government came to power. When Akayev was toppled, dozens of people died, but when Bakiev was overthrown, there were hundreds of killed. So if the authorities do not think better of it, if they do not start the reforms, as a businessman, I would, for instance, have to say that I would like the taxes to be lowered, but they should be paid in reality, and there would not be avoidance of taxes. For instance, when the business avoids taxes, then the controlling bodies come to them. And of course, the schemes of tax avoidance are controlled by the authorities. Nothing has changed here after Yanukovych has fled. So now the association agreement with the EU, the economic part of it, is being postponed for a year. How do you assess the European perspectives of Ukraine? I think they are positive. The Ukraine is a big country as far as territory and population and natural resources are concerned. We are in a beneficial geographic position. It is interesting, has to be interesting to Europe as a strategic partner, including the situation we now have with Russia. In principle, from a historic point of view, it's rather sad that the situation between West and Ukraine now reminds me of the Munich plot of 1938. If the history has the tendency to repeat itself. Lana is from Sevastopol in Crimea, and she will tell about her participation in Maidan.
I would like to say that it was quite clear for everyone what was happening. I would rather discuss my own view on the outcomes of the phenomenon. In my view, Maidan and the revolution took place not against Yanukovych as such, but against the system that we had in that state and still have it there. Unfortunately, Yanukovych was just the tip of the iceberg. He was governing and managing the system. But the system is persisting. It's still there. And I don't think that the Maidan and people who died there and still dying for the same cause in the ATO zone fought and are fighting for the new faces to be in power instead of the old ones. In my view, what we have presently is the rebuild of the system, of the schemes that were supporting the system. And those people are different, living in a different reality where there's no death, where there's just money and power. And they are building some castles of the air, and this is built on the bog, and the bog is just sucking everything in. And I am active in anti-monopoly legislation, healthcare, food processing. As a lawyer, I participate in many task forces, many meetings, many parleys, also with the governmental bodies. It's quite clear to me that no reforms are taking place. We can see no new faces, no reforms. What we have is just the good old figures from the old system that were purged by the first wave of people's illustration. They're coming back, they are back, and the so-called new people, but not so new people, in fact, who had to do with the system in the past. There are some exceptions. Some people who come from the Maidan, from business with Western kind of education, but they are not the drivers of our developers. So their developments, they failed to get all the necessary powers to carry out reforms. For the reforms, we need the political will, first of all. And in my view, this is migration to Rostov on the Don, and the trash bin illustration will seem as a joke if they fail them, because the consequences will be much more terrible. We have to introduce new faces to the key positions in the governmental bodies, and to such an extent that we can dismantle the system. Such appointments should be A, transparent, B, competition-based, and for the people to understand who is appointment and based on what criteria, some control. And of course, without proper judicial system and enforcement system, people have to investigate and try the Maidan cases. Nobody is imprisoned right now. We have to see the effect. For 6 months, we've listened to words, 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 pre-campaigning, post-campaigning PR, political PR that has no outcome. Reforms that are being implemented are also in words, and the business community and the general public are not really participating with a full-fledged. And some documents that are supposed to reflect some reforms, they do not provide proper discussion because they proposed for it on a very short notice. This is a pessimistic note. I'm aware of that, so it's too early to be optimistic. Would like to see some effects, so my optimism will show itself when I see with my own eyes some changes, and that includes the area where I'm active. So you have some kind of disappointment, and the values have not been implemented. Would you have come to the Maidan had you known that? Of course I would. We have the proactive minority, like Ahmed Dokidze said, so we can be the drivers, the forerunners, and if there's people who are in power now are not ready to change their mode of operation, they will be just removed, and no Rostov on the Don will save them. There will be a much more aggressive and uncompromised situation. Sonia Vishnevska, she was present in the Maidan from the second day, head of press service of a big company in fashion industry. Good afternoon. This is an anniversary that is very important for everyone. Because in fact that we do not always realize how much we have experienced and survived. Very intensive events and stories that happened, and we fully understand that this is not the end yet. I remember the commencement of Maidan, and I remember that from the very outset, I had no illusions of an easy revolution comparable to something that had been happening for 10 years before that point, because those people had many people who actually were publicly active in an unusual and unexpected way even for themselves. And they proved to be the best part of the society, the vanguard. They were not present there for nothing, and they wouldn't go away from for nothing. So it wasn't about the association agreement. That was about dismantling the system. We had to break the system. That had that key thing. If any idea or anything in Ukraine, something was not so convenient or comfortable for their rulers, they had to be destroyed or could not be developed. Unfortunately, many of such ideas, very necessary, very high quality, would be nipped in the nub. So after the 12 months we are talking about, we've at least come out as Ukrainians, many of us, and we contributed to development of our nations as never before. I work in the industry that has to do with fashion and culture in our country. That's the industry that for many years wasn't part of development and priority in Ukraine. That was a big problem because we were losing the things the active develop for as active opportunities for developers, but that wasn't important for the rulers of our country at that point. I'm glad that after this year, people who wouldn't support each other in any way got together, and regardless of the difficulties of the year, and the situation is still grave, but we've implemented the projects, all the projects in my industry, regardless of the dire straits, and that includes our financial situation. That was implemented because people joined the forces, people who could promote Ukraine to some visible phenomenon, visible points on the world's map, and some projects were launched as well, which is not of less importance and delight to us. This is thanks to the people, to their efforts. It's very good that they express themselves as active citizens. This is now very conscious, and this should be a matter for education from early days of one's life. We got together not because of the idea, but because of grief and tears and psychological injury. That's a different way, and that's always a very powerful uniting force. We're still living through this experience because we have losses, casualties every day. I'm not disappointed in the revolution. It was very special and very powerful. Changed a lot in my attitude to work, to the city, to my work, to the city, to my country, and I have different letters from my foreign colleagues with the beginning of the letter. I'm from Ukraine. It always the answer is all right. We can discuss our partnership and go on with our partnership. Maybe we cannot serve as a financial foundation, or we cannot come in person for a long time. Ministries of foreign affairs had would issue some warnings for their citizens, for their nationals willing to travel to Ukraine. And another point, the things that we see, many of us in our industry would think about changing the occupation after such an experience, but we stayed. We ask ourselves, would you do that? Would you go on with it? Are you interested? Is it of any priority in the difficult situation when people need assistance at hospitals? Should you stay in your position? You should stay if you stay, but with the highest performance imaginable. We changed the power, but yesterday some Russians were asking me about my disappointment in the power. Not disappointed, but we are very vigilant, and we are on our guard. They are having the chance, but my predecessor said here at this mic that it's a very valuable chance for them. It's win or lose situation, but we have to swim or sink. But it is also our chance, and it's our lives for more years to come. We have to be as strong as we have been, because unfortunately we see how many challenges we have also before the authorities. challenging the authorities and the political forces of different color now in the parliament, and we cannot expect so much connectivity and interoperability there, but we have to compensate for that with our public efforts. One of the reasons why you came to the Maidan was that you wanted to make Ukraine a more comfortable place to live, to stop Ukrainians that were thinking about leaving Ukraine. We know the coalition agreement is signed. We know some candidates for the highest positions in the government. So do you think that the new government and the parliament will make the Ukraine more comfortable? This may be, they won't, maybe they will. It's their chance. I have just answered this question. It's a difficult period. I know people who have come back from very rich jurisdictions, and they have done a lot and are doing a lot. This is the biggest surprise for us all, because we discovered people who are doing unbelievable things of the country, because I was really impressed. Some of them I met for the first time. They're still staying in Ukraine. I'm happy to know that my friends are thinking about perhaps making some joint ventures with Ukraine. They're thinking of coming back to Ukraine. But this is border state. One can cross to one side or the other, and we need a lot of wisdom, power, energy, and this is not going to happen in 5 years. Dmitro Bondar, Residential Services is his industry. He is a manager of a big company and father of 3. Yes, this is true. I'm Dmitro Bondar. I'm head of a group of educational companies. I would like to talk about education, and my colleagues were discussing changes. And have I witnessed any changes over this year? I remember one case. I came to my daughter's school. She was in the first form, and I asked the principal whether anything changed. She pointed to portraits of presidents. One of them disappeared, and to me that was a joke, because nothing or very little changed there. I'm a pragmatist, and even in the Maidan, I wasn't destroying any monuments, but I was in the Auto Maidan. That was my way to prevent somebody from going somewhere and to help the Maidan, actual Maidan. Now, when the February events were over, I had my expectations about the new system, the new faces and new modes of operations, new culture and self-consciousness of the people who were making that revolution. So basically, what's happening now? I think there's this very positive thing about culture and self-awareness. I know dozens of people who owners of big companies, but for 5 to 6 months they've been volunteers, and they sacrificed their businesses for the cause and for our soldiers. I also can see people who want to contribute their time, their money, some legislative initiatives. This is another advantage, and this is my expectation. This is something that can prove all the development useful. And there are no open competitions, like Lana said, and I agree. We have people come into the executive branch of power, people I cannot possibly understand. Very few people with Western education. I'm part of the initiative to involve people for the government, people with Western education. Very few people, a handful, literally. But even being a minister, you can have a deputy minister controlling you and depriving you of any choice. So this is a serious matter. Whether anything is changed in business in Latvia and education in Ukraine, in particular, is something that is difficult to change over a year. It's overregulated, and there we cannot expect any serious changes for 2 or 3 years. And the most that we can do is to change the rules of the game. And we can change the rules, self-governance at universities, the evaluation criteria, because we form the generation that in 10 to 15 years will be at the helm of our society, of our future government. A father of three I am, and I would like my children to have this opportunity to change, to influence, to live in the country in a normal way, and not to be passive, pawns in somebody else's game, like the gross master that we had, our former president. I'm no positive or negative inclinations. We have this enormous chance and formidable risk of getting more radical because people's expectations are very high. You have 3 children, and will they study abroad or in Ukraine? I understand that your credit of trust to the system of education, the government is not exhausted. I'll be frank. Yeah, when I was choosing the school for my eldest, we had very few private schools that had a system of evaluation different from the Ukrainian one, because the current system is like some kind of educational concentration camp. And yes, if it goes on like that, my children will go abroad to study. I don't think it's bad. The more people we have with such educational background, the more will come back and to change our life. Boris Danevich, a lawyer and partner of a big company.
I came to Maidan on the 21st of November, and then Maidan was pro-European, but very fast the Maidan has changed into the revolution of dignity, revolution for the sake of transparency, honesty, and efficiency of authority, and Maidan against corruption. All those people who are here, they have brought sandwiches and firewood and all the kind of things. However, it was in the days of Maidan that analytical groups and expert groups started to form that worked on the strategy for the development of the country. And after Maidan, when there was an understanding that it is very important that new people come to power who have experience and expertise and who are not corrupt, there was also the understanding of at least 2 difficulties for this process. First of them was in the fact that the bureaucratic system was absolutely not tuned to accept these people and to help them in any way. More than that, our Ukrainian bureaucratic system is now aimed at repelling all the attempts at reform. Another problem was that the conditions of state service are absolutely inadequate. In the beginning of March, I got to know that deputy minister in Ukraine gets 4,700 hryvnia. This is one of the things that should be changed, and it was then that the initiative formed that united people from different consulting and law firms who worked on the mechanism that would provide for several things. First, the creation of the funds of additional financing of experts who could come for 2 or 3 or 5 years to take part in reforms, the funds that can control and finance people so that they can come for several years and engage in reforms, and they can work for several years. We are now talking about this with international financial institutions who have interest in this, and Ukrainian businessmen said that they were ready to give money to finance these efficient bureaucrats and not pay the same money as bribes. At the moment, this draft law is almost ready. We are talking about it with the President's administration. I hope that this initiative will be accepted by the new parliament, and as a temporary measure, this will work. And there's a lot of examples like this in Ukraine of the analytical and working groups that work for free, that work in order to change Ukraine so that Ukraine becomes more efficient as a state. There's a lot of such groups, and this is a very important issue of voluntary work. It has grown in Maidan, and it is still running, but there is a problem about insufficient and inefficient support by the state of the voluntary work. In fact, what they need is not to hinder the voluntary organizations, and there should be adequate conditions as far as taxation is concerned. Another problem that has to be solved by the new parliament is the issue of non-paying taxes on the sums that are being collected by voluntary workers, volunteers, or from the payments to internally displaced persons or participants in the anti-terrorist operation. I am not at all disappointed with what was happening over the last year, because I did not go to Maidan in order to see or hear what the leaders were doing. I came there to see what I have done. Maybe I am not 100% satisfied with what I have done over the year, but I will continue my work. I think it is very important that we, the civil society that emerged as a result of this wave, do not perceive the situation as expectations from some other people. The situation will never be ideal. Our influences, our steps, our work in different initiatives and voluntary work, this is what can change this country. This is what I believe in. I have a question to you as a lawyer and as a person who is very active in protecting the interests of foreign business. I guess you were head of a committee in the American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine. I have a question. You know, it is symbolic that the coalition agreement was signed, which was very, very hard to sign, to agree. As an expert, how do you assess this document? There's no brief assessment because it is a huge document, and it deals with many issues, at least in the version that I saw, but it does contain a number of positive steps that are designated. The cardinal question is how they will be realized, because in our practice of creation of laws and other documents, the huge stumbling block is the issue of realization of these documents. So this is going to be a key issue for the parliament and the government and the civil society, not to leave this beyond our attention and concentrate on achieving the goals that were stated and engage in this process. But of course, there's my subjective opinion, which is not very positive. The coalition agreement is not the document that defines the future of Ukraine for many years. This still has to be discussed, and it is very important that we all as civil society pay attention to this. Do we have any other questions? I have asked my questions. Thank you very, very much. Thank you once again for coming here. And as you are in the book, you will all have a copy of this book, Euromaidan, the Rebirth of the Nations. Thank you for coming here. Thank you that you are now with us, same as you were with us in Maidan. Our next event, which is a roundtable with historians, will start